How much RAM do you really need to run Windows 11? Today we'll go from 8GB of RAM all the way down to 128MB of RAM. That's gonna be fun. These are the system specifications that I'm gonna be using. I also disabled the page file for this Windows machine, so for this whole video we are going to be using only physical RAM with no swap usage. So as you can see, we have the system running on 8GB of RAM currently, which is a pretty standard setup. Of course, everything works fine and I guess there's not much we can check here. So let's shut down and reduce the RAM to 4GB. I changed it down to 4GB of RAM, and this is what Microsoft has actually written as minimum requirement for Windows 11. Right off the bat, if we open up the Task Manager, here we can see that Windows 11 eats up about 50% of the 4GB of RAM already, not even doing anything on the system, which is I guess normal, and the CPU usage seems higher than usual as well. Using the system like normal doesn't show any noticeable differences straight away. However, if you push it a bit further and open multiple applications on Windows, that's where Windows starts to struggle. We have about 5 programs open and none of them are actually loading. CPU is working hard. If you are using like 1 or 2 programs at a time, then Windows is usable. If more than that, then you might notice a lot of issues. Now let's drop it down to 2GB of RAM. So let's wait for it to load. Now in the Task Manager we can see that it's 2GB of RAM. Memory usage is pretty much maxed out. So let's just keep this one right here and let's open some applications. Microsoft Store took a really long while to load and I thought it would succeed, but then it crashed. Alongside other programs, I tried opening Microsoft Edge, but it refused to open. I tried once again, but that just messed everything up. Microsoft Edge is not responding. It's gonna report it to Microsoft. And it has seemingly broken our desktop because the wallpaper has disappeared and we cannot do anything on the desktop at all. Let's see, what does it say? Windows Explorer, restart. And we're back. Windows 11 on 2GB of RAM is pretty painful. But now, let's reduce Windows down to 1GB of RAM. This is gonna be interesting. Right away we can see that Windows has frozen at the loading screen. We wait a couple seconds and it just takes a while for the UI elements to even load. I tried to right click the taskbar so that I can open the Task Manager, but the contextual menu just wasn't appearing. Until everything just goes black. Now I had to use Ctrl-Alt-Delete. Can I do something like this? As you can see, we have 1GB of RAM. The CPU usage is on a really high load, and my computer was getting kinda hot at this point. I wasn't sure what happened to Explorer EXE, but I tried to restart it. Then we saw this. I think there was something that if Windows is running really low on memory, then it will change the UI elements to an older design. Then it went black again, and after that, Windows had changed our aspect ratio to 4:3, it looks like, and a much lower resolution. I thought maybe everything would work now, but no. Very soon, the UI elements disappeared again. So on 1GB of RAM with no swap, Windows is pretty useless. However, I decided to drop it down even more to 512MB of RAM. It does start okay. This is far below the minimum requirements. I think the system has crashed on login screen. When it loaded, we were greeted with a pitch black screen, and this time even our cursor didn't load. Oh wait. After like a minute of waiting, it did appear. I can't even do Ctrl-Alt-Delete, so I kept waiting. But no, it just doesn't work at this point. However, what if we drop it down to 256MB of RAM? I haven't had enough yet, so I did that, and as Windows was starting up, we got this blue screen. Our PC device needs to be repaired. Let's press on F1. After trying to enter the recovery environment and failing, we now have some kind of glitched out black lines on the screen. So we cannot run it at all on 256MB of RAM. However, what if I turn on the page file and then try to run Windows on 512MB of RAM and 256MB of RAM with swap usage? So we are booting up to 512MB of RAM right now. And the UI took a good few seconds to load. Even just dragging the cursor around or moving icons is pretty slow. But if we try to open the start menu, it doesn't really want to open. We had to wait about 15 seconds for it to actually open. Same goes for the task manager, but this one takes even longer to open and load. As we can see, we have maxed out our CPU usage and RAM usage. CPU just doesn't drop below 100% usage. My computer's fans are spinning like crazy right now, and it's kinda hot as well. There's really not much else we can do on the system. You can only open the task manager and I guess just stare at it. Also, I cannot shut it down. Failed to power off virtual machine. I had to force quit on it. But now, what about 256 megabytes of RAM with the page file turned on? We get a blue screen of that. Config list failed. I'm guessing Windows cannot load registry hives with this low RAM, which is why it's failing. Then a few seconds later we get a second BSOD. This one has the error code of registry error. And then after that it fails again. We are back on this screen. Check out this video about file names that you should not use on your Windows 11 and I'll see you there.